Hey, so if you're looking for a book that has some really good writing, a book that really inspires you to write more, and if you're not all that worried about the plot, not that this book doesn't have a plot, but generally, if that's not something that is super important to you, and a book that in general just reminds you to appreciate life and all that we have in our everyday lives. And I know a lot of this is a cliche thing to say, but hear me out. If all of this is something that's right up your alley, then this is a book that I would recommend to you. And the book that I'm talking about, of course, is Gilead by Marilynne Robinson. And I read it on my Kindle, as I always do. This was my first time reading her work. So this is literally my first novel of her. I believe it won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction in 2005. It's a historical fiction slash literary fiction. I would say that's appropriate. And I don't like to give out the actual description or plot summaries of the book. So if that is something that you're looking for, I will leave a link down below to the Goodreads page of that book. You can take a look. So the reason I read this book is actually very interesting because I never planned on reading it, but I saw a few people who I follow on Goodreads read it, and they had very good things to say about the books. Since I read all my books on Kindle, I went on Amazon and I downloaded the free sample for the book. And usually in the sample, you can, of course, read the first 5 to 10% of the book for free. And so there was this scene in the first 5%. So I read it. So that I read the sample. There was this scene where there are two characters standing on a graveyard, and there's the sun and the moon described. And that's all I'm going to say about that scene. But the way it was written was just really, really good. It gave me goosebumps. So just based on that scene alone and how it was written, I went ahead and bought the book and decided to read it. Now, I usually highlight when I read my books or take notes on my Kindle. But in this case, I gave up on highlighting after a few pages. It was just everything was so beautifully written and perfectly written that I just thought, I'll just sit back and enjoy the prose. And when I say good writing, I guess what I mean is just a good flow when you read it. So there are not too many long sentences, but at the same time, there are not too many short sentences just to create that emphasis. The text is not too pretentious, but not too simple also. So it's just perfect. And also the length of the novel itself, I would say, is perfect in my opinion. So all in all, I think the writing just was really good, and that's what impressed me the most. And I guess there were certain passages that just went over my head, certain paragraphs, and I know, I mean, I understood what was going on at its face value, but I knew there were a lot more going on thematically and on the literary front, and I just wasn't mature enough as a reader, I guess, to recognize all of that. So it was a little plain to me. But that's fine with me because I want to grow as a reader, and when I read more books, I might get to that level where I can actually understand what's going on. But I would like to say that there were a lot of people online who felt that the book was boring at times and was a drag, and I can see why they say that. But yeah, personally, I'm a passive reader. I'm not really looking for what's going to happen next. I'm pretty much happy to take a back seat and enjoy the ride. So yeah, so that was not really a problem for me. So the main character in the book is a preacher. He's an old man who works at a church. He writes sermons in the church for the church. So there were a few references to Christianity and church practices that I couldn't understand, and I had to constantly look it up. So that was a little annoying at times, but again, that's not really a fault of the book. I guess that's just a me thing rather than the book thing. To me, this book simply is a beautiful love letter to life in general. Any book that just makes us think and sit back for a moment and appreciate everything that we have in our lives today and everything that we take for granted, I guess. is a good book. You know, any book that can do that, in my opinion, is a really good book. And it also makes a quiet case for religion and faith. There's nothing over the top or overt, you know. It doesn't even try to defend religion when it tries to do it. You know, it just makes a quiet case. So as a reader, you're just quietly listening and nodding your head along, and you're not really trying to wrestle with the text whenever religion or faith comes up. You know, so it really handles it well, in my opinion. So it makes a quiet case for at the end of the book, you know, you will feel like it made a really good case for religion and faith in general. And also, the format of the novel really helps. It is an epistolary novel, so this old man is writing this letter to his son, who is very young, who's just 7 years old, I believe. So he's writing all of this down to his son as life lessons, or just his his side of the story, I guess. So whatever the book tries to, whatever message the book tries to tell, really works because of the format. And like I said earlier, it really inspires us to write more. At least for me, it really did. So that's always a good thing, I guess. So that was my review or reaction to the book, whatever you want to call it. Let me know if you want to read it, if you plan to read it, or if you've already read it. Let me know, and I'll see you when I read my next book.